The storm raged with a ferocity no one in the small town of Riverton had seen in decades. The rain pounded against the windows of the old diner, where a handful of stranded travelers huddled together, seeking warmth and safety. Among them was Jason Carter, a man whose life seemed to unravel with every passing day. The divorce papers were still fresh in his bag, his job termination email buried somewhere in his phone, and his wallet held just enough cash for a single meal. Jason felt like a man abandoned, by the world, by himself, and most painfully by God. Seated across from Jason was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her name was Evelyn, and she'd been living in Riverton her entire life. Evelyn noticed Jason's furrowed brow and the way his hands trembled as he held his coffee cup. After a moment, she leaned over and said softly, "Storms have a way of bringing clarity if you're willing to see it." Jason looked at her, incredulous. "Clarity?" he scoffed. "This storm is just another thing going wrong. My life is a mess, and if God's out there, he's clearly forgotten about me." Evelyn's smile didn't waver. "Funny thing about God's plan," she said. "It often looks like chaos before it reveals itself. Do you want to hear a story?" Jason shrugged, figuring he had nothing better to do. Evelyn began, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "Years ago," she said, "when I was about your age, my husband and I lived in a little house just down the road from here. We'd been trying to have a baby for years, but it just wasn't happening. We'd prayed and prayed, but every test, every doctor visit, every disappointment felt like a slap in the face. I started to think God had forgotten about me too. I was angry, hurt, and ready to give up on him altogether. One particularly bad night, after another failed attempt, I went outside and screamed at the sky. I shouted, 'Why? Why won't you give me what I want? What did I do wrong?' And for a long time there was nothing. Just silence. I went back inside, feeling empty." Jason leaned in slightly despite himself, caught up in Evelyn's tale. "A few weeks later," she continued, "my husband and I got a call from an old friend. He knew of a young woman who couldn't take care of her newborn baby and was looking for someone to adopt him. At first I resisted. It wasn't what I'd prayed for. I wanted my own baby, my own blood. But something in my heart told me to say yes. So we did. That baby, Jason, grew up to be the kindest, most wonderful man. He's a teacher now, inspiring kids who've had it rough. I wouldn't trade him for anything in the world. Looking back, I realized God hadn't abandoned me. He just had a different plan, one I couldn't see in my pain." Jason stared at Evelyn, her story stirring something deep within him. "So you think this, everything I'm going through, is part of some plan?" Evelyn nodded. "I don't know what it is, but I do know that storms pass. And often when they do, they leave the air clearer, fresher. Maybe it's time to stop asking why things are happening to you and start asking what they might be preparing you for." Jason looked out the window as the storm outside began to wane, the wind losing its edge and the rain softening to a steady patter. For a moment he sat in silence, processing Evelyn's words. The heaviness in his chest lightened ever so slightly. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in weeks he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Evelyn was right. Hours passed and the storm cleared completely. As the travelers began to gather their belongings and prepare to leave the diner, Jason lingered. He found himself struck by the ordinary details he hadn't noticed before. The warmth of the coffee cup in his hands, the hum of conversation around him, the way the world seemed quieter after the storm. Jason realized that he hadn't stopped to appreciate small moments like these in years. Perhaps Evelyn's perspective, to seek meaning instead of blame, was a lesson worth learning after all. The thing about life is that it rarely unfolds the way we expect it to. We make plans, set goals, and envision futures that align with our desires. But then life happens. The unexpected, the painful, the seemingly unfair. It's easy to feel abandoned, to think that God's forgotten us. But what if, instead of asking why, we asked what? What is this moment teaching me? What opportunities are hiding within this struggle? What strength am I gaining that I'll need later? God's plan is rarely obvious in the moment. It's like looking at the back of a tapestry, a mess of knots and tangled threads. But flip it over and you'll see the intricate, beautiful design that was being woven all along. Trusting in that design doesn't mean we won't feel pain or confusion. It doesn't mean every storm will make sense immediately. But it does mean we can have faith that our struggles are not in vain. Take Jason's story for example. At the diner, he began to shift his perspective, and that moment became a turning point. He left Riverton a few days later, unsure of his path but determined to move forward. A month after the storm, Jason decided to volunteer at a community shelter, helping those who'd lost even more than he had. It was there that he discovered a passion for social work, and eventually he pursued a new career dedicated to helping others rebuild their lives. The heartbreak he thought would define him forever became the foundation for a purpose he never imagined. So if you're in the middle of your storm right now, remember Evelyn's words. Stop asking why this is happening to you. Start asking what it's preparing you for. Let go of the need to control every outcome and trust that the knots and tangles of your life are weaving something beautiful, even if you can't see it yet. Because in the end, storms clear. And what's left behind is often exactly what we needed, even if it's not what we thought we wanted. Let that truth guide you as you navigate the rough waters of life, knowing that every struggle has the potential to shape you into a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate version of yourself.